Okay, and welcome back. Let me see if the microphone is still working. Always better to check that at the beginning and later be sorry. Welcome back. Sounds good. So I hear myself in the stream. Good. So coming back. So I showed the showcase before, the demonstration of the game, and now I want to talk about a few things. So first of all, what kind of features are currently missing? So there I always have a little bit of a list. So currently I'm working on the cutscenes, on the introduction with the text and so on that we have seen before, with currently the black background where I mentioned I want to have this camera transition, this movement in the forest map and so on. And then I also need then the final trigger for the boss fight on the last map, where I also will have some sort of cutscene. I have a couple of things already prepared for that. Maybe I can quickly show that. So I have a so-called trigger configurator class, which is very simple. It simply takes a string of the trigger name, and then it creates a so-called trigger. And let's, for example, check the cutscene as an example. This is simply a trigger script. A trigger script is basically a list of trigger actions, which are then executed one after another. It's a sequence of actions that is all executed in a so-called trigger system. So it's related to a trigger entity with a trigger component and things like that. And yeah, so I have there a DSL with Kotlin, which I like a lot for those kind of things. And as you see here, so a trigger script that has this trigger function and then a couple of action functions. So for example, action remove, it removes an entity, in that case the script entity, which triggers the cutscene at the beginning. Then we play the intro music. We have a waiting time of 2 seconds. After those 2 seconds, we display the first text with a duration of 11 seconds, then the second, third, fourth, and fifth text with, again, always a specific duration. And finally, we fade out the music over 3.5 seconds. We don't wait for this action, so it simply moves on to the next one, which is then moving a screen transition from the cutscene screen to the game screen. And that's it. So this extension functions also just for you, if you're interested, there's always this trigger configurator DSL, and that simply is then remembering all the different actions. And in the background, all of these DSL functions of the trigger configuration, they always create a specific action class, a trigger action class. And let's take, for example, I don't know, a very simple one, the play music one. There I have a class which is called trigger action, which allows currently 2 kind of methods that you can override. The start one is optional, and then an update one, which is mandatory. And update needs to return true when the action is finished, and otherwise it returns false, which means in the next frame, the same action gets called again. And in this case, for play music, I simply call from the audio service that I have the play method to start the music, and then I return true because then this action here is already done. For example, for the delay action, there you pass in how many seconds should the game wait before it moves on to the next trigger action, and there it simply subtracts from the time that we pass here, the delta time between 2 frames. And this one is only finished when the delay here, so the seconds, is here less than or equal to 0. So this is how the trigger system works. I most likely need to add a few more actions here for the forest cutscene, which I am currently missing. But other than that, I'm quite happy with what I have here. It's actually very similar to how I solved it in the Quilly Adventure game a couple of years ago. And yeah, I personally like that approach. The downside would be, my opinion, that you always need to compile it. So whenever you change a trigger, you need to recompile the code. In contrast to if you would have this trigger somehow externally stored in a file or whatever, and then pass that file, then you don't need to recompile the game codes to run the trigger. But to be honest, this game is so small, and making a tiny little change here and recompiling it's, I don't know, less than a second on my machine. So it's really not an issue. Maybe that's a problem if the game would be really, really big. I don't know. I don't have experience with that. But in that small game, it really doesn't matter. And there I have simply the Kotlin programming language. I don't need to rethink a new or work with a new triggering language or something like that. And yeah, I have the DSL functionality of Kotlin. And yeah, that's really great. So I like it from a developer point of view. Good, then I'm missing the save functionality, but that is, yeah, I think not that difficult. I have thought of some things where I want to automatically save the game. So for example, when you go to another map before you start the combat, things like that. So there will be an automatic saving. Yeah, and other than that, I did that already many times. There's nothing new for me to the save functionality. I think that should be straightforward. And this is a tiny little thing I don't need to mention that. This is then some polishing of the game. So to add some better sound effects, better graphics, more actions, more spells, things like that. So this is also just some game polishing in the end. That one is new. So there I want to add also a loot table to enemies. So currently I have the object tile set in tiled, and interesting, it shows here a different layout than on my notebook. That's interesting. I like the view here. So on my notebook, just to explain it, the tree and that graphic here, they are bigger than the normal graphics. So the normal graphics are 16 by 16. The tree is 48 by 48, and the sword is 35 by 33. And on my notebook, it's displayed in a grid. So the tree, since it's bigger, simply then has or makes that these other 16 by 16 graphics have then a gap to the right and to the bottom to display it correctly in a grid. I didn't know that it actually can show that like that. So I prefer that view, that everything is simply the same size of a tile. But no idea how I did that. Most likely some view option. Anyway, coming back to my point. So currently when I define an enemy, I can define the stats, what kind of spells it can use, the level, how many talents, so how many gold it will give, how many experience it will give, and things like that. And in addition, I want to define also what kind of items it can drop with probability. So for example, 20% it drops a smaller health potion, or 10% it drops a helmet or whatever. And there I'm waiting for a specific feature in tiled, which I know they are currently working on and should be available soonish, where they want to support, I forgot how they called it, but I think array-like attributes, something like that. So anyway, you can then have like a list of entries like here for the combat actions, but instead of just having true or false, I can then have here also a number. So it's more like a key value map that we can then define. And yeah, that would be great if that feature comes out in the near future. Then I will simply integrate it into my game. Otherwise, I will make the item drop table, of course, somehow configurable in my game itself. But for sure, I want that the enemies can drop some items. Currently, they just give experience and gold. And I think that's just normal for an RPG. They should also give a couple of items from time to time. Then I want to add one more screen to the beginning of the game. So when the assets are loaded, then there will be one intermediate screen before you come to the main screen, which shows the controls. So the keyboard controls and maybe also the controller. I'm not sure, but I also wanted to support the Xbox controller, but not 100% sure if I will add that. But at least I want to show the keyboard controls in a separate screen. And I want to change then finally the health and mana potions, because currently I think that's the health potion. They heal by a fixed amount. So for example, the health potion heals by 30 and the mana potion heals by 15. And I don't like those fixed values because thinking further, it was not going to happen with that game, but thinking it further into the future, if there would be a late game and the character doesn't have 100 life anymore, maybe he has, 2,000 lives or hit points, then having it with fixed values, a small health potion would be then basically useless because healing for 30 hit points is useless. And having it percentage based, so for example, that the small health potion restores 20% of the health, of the maximum hit points, then it's useful throughout the entire game. So that's why I want to change that to percentage based healing instead of fixed numbers. And that's it actually. So if I have all of that, I think I will be able to finish that within the next 2 months. So normally I work on the game once per week, sometimes twice. The last 2 weeks I was very motivated. I worked a couple of days on it a little bit, but normally it's just once or twice per week. But I think to polish everything, make the main menu look nicer, have a nice introduction scene, have the boss fight and so on, an outro sequence, all of that will take a little bit of time, but I think should be able to finish it within the next 2 or 3 months. That would be at least my personal goal that I set with that. And yeah, last but not least, I want to thank a specific person. I don't know if he will watch that video, but I have the idea that I want to host this game then or provide it on the itch.io website, which you saw me using already quite a lot. I think I mentioned it also in my tutorials. That's the main site where I always get my assets from. So usually I go here to game assets and then filter for the specific things and take something from there. Everything that I use, or I would say 99% that I use for the game, are from that specific website. There are some exceptions, but I have a README file and I give credits to all of them, even if they don't ask for that. But I have them all linked in the credit sections here below so that you can find all the assets that I'm using. The fonts, the music and sound effect files, all of that is mentioned here below. And my idea would be that I host and provide this game then on this website. Also link then the different people and the assets there so that they also get some attention maybe throughout my game. And I also want to give those people then something back. And my initial idea was that I set up some sponsoring or whatever it's called on that website. So if people enjoyed the game, then they can spend a little bit of money, like basically with the assets here. You're also, for some of them, it's up to you if you want to pay the author something or if you want to get it for free. And I had the same idea for my game. And a portion, maybe everything, I don't know, depends on, of course, what's happening. But at least a portion of that money I want to invest in or give it back to the different authors of the assets that I'm using. I already made a payment once for the tiled editor because I used that really a lot. And I cannot understand why it's free because for me, it's really an amazing software that I use a lot for my games. So they already gave something to the developer here to thank him for his hard work. And yeah, as mentioned, I want to do the same thing then with the people where I'm using the assets from. And there was an option on itch.io where you could set up something like that people can then pay for your game, I think. But was a little bit complicated for me and I was not 100% sure with the legal issues and things like that. So in the end, I looked then for another option, which was then GitHub, because there I sponsored the tiled guy on his repository, because when you search for, tiled GitHub, I think we should find it. I hope so. There's sponsor button. Yeah, this one here. So this is how I sponsored that project. And I have something similar now on GitHub, but I actually forgot that I set that up. So that was during the day or the time when I looked into itch.io, how I can host things, when you create an account, what you need to do. And yeah, then I also looked into GitHub and the sponsoring stuff. And there for me, it was easier to set it up. And I did that, but forgot about it. But actually, one of you guys out there already sponsored me, which was not related to the game. It was related to the tutorial series with Kotlin that I made and LibGDX. And for that, thank you to the person who did that. I hope you're watching. So thank you, sir. And yeah, as mentioned, portion of that money, maybe everything, I'm not sure, will be going to the different authors of the assets so that they also get something back. Because it's, of course, I am the developer of the game. It's the majority of the work. But in the end, if I wouldn't have those assets available and could use that, then my game would never finish. Because if I need to draw the graphics and they look like total garbage, then I would simply not be motivated to develop anything and the game would never be getting finished. So, of course, I want to give something back to the people there as well. Good, and I think that's enough talking for me. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any feedback or maybe feature requests or ideas about the game, just let me know. Also, if you want to dig deeper or dive deeper into one of the functionalities that I have showed in the demonstration before, then also just let me know. I can make a video about it and go into the details of it. And other than that, I wish you a nice weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day, the evening, whatever time you have, and bye-bye.